millions of viewers abroad. Hi, everyone. We're live. Beautiful. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Mayer, and I'm delighted to be introducing Juliette Han. Juliette is the Chief Operating Officer of Cambrian Biopharma. She has a background from Two Sigma and McKinsey. She has a Ph.D. in neuroscience. She also keeps up, and I'm so delighted to hand over the floor to Juliette. Please join me in welcoming Juliette Han.
Thank you. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm maybe even more excited than you are to talk to you about a few things I've learned throughout my career journey. But without further ado, I want to jump right in. And what I'm going to start with is I'm going to show you profiles of 4 people. And they're amazing people. Probably you've heard of some of them, you've seen them. And I want you to think about how it makes you feel as I talk to you about them.
Make sure that your screen is being presented. Beautiful.
So first, Amanda Gorman. You guys have probably seen her pictures, heard her speak at the presidential inauguration. She was the youngest poet to read at such an event. And not only that, even before that, she was inspired to become a youth delegate for the UN at age 16. She published her first book of poetry at age 17. And she founded a nonprofit at age 18. And she became the first youth poet to open the literary season for the Library of Congress. Second set of people is Steve and Daniel Lee. They were on the recent list of Forbes 30 under 30. So they're in their 20s. They founded Aura Health in their 20s. This came out of adversity that they went through with their parents' divorce. They realized the importance of mental health and having access to it. So they wanted to make that possible for the masses. So their company now can reach 5 million users, 150 coaches, and they're here to make that part of the world better for all of us. And here is a woman, Natasha Shaibani. She is a 26-year-old professor at University of Virginia. She is working on therapies that combine ultrasound with chemo, really trying to break through as to how do we detect and treat cancer patients. Winner of the NIH Director Early Independence Award. And of course, without being said, she has a Ph.D. and is already teaching at this age. So let's pause there and let me ask you, how do you feel? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel a little bit stressed? Yes? I personally feel stressed when I read these stories. I feel inspired. I feel motivated. But often these stories that paint the impossible and make it possible makes me feel like it might be impossible for me. That I don't have the stroke of inspiration at age 16, or in my 20s, I did not achieve this national and global recognition and having this impact. So today, I want to speak to you and give you not messages of inspiration and motivation, because I'm sure you will get that in spades every day. And I'm sure from better sources than me. So instead, I'm going to speak to you about how to just be, and how just being can also lead you to life of fulfillment and impact, and really a growth journey that can end in an impactful life for yourself and others. So to do that, I'm going to go through 4 lessons that I have learned throughout my career journey. And hopefully you have something to take away after today. So let's start with the first lesson. There's no way. So imagine you have a goal of wanting to feed people delicious food, bringing people together and giving them this experience. So let's just say that your impact statement in your life is to create and feed amazing food to people to experience. Now, you can see great examples of that, celebrity chefs, right? And they're probably the most visible people doing these things. But often there are many paths to get to this that is not only not visible, but maybe even more impactful. So let me explore what that means. So I would say there are three ways to get to your goals: immerse, build up, and build around. Now, immersion might be let's say you pick a cuisine you're passionate about, perhaps Peruvian food. You can go to Peru and start exploring, learning it from the people who are there, and then building out your career in something that's passionate to you. You might not be a celebrity chef ever, but then this is something that you immerse into because you're passionate about that. A different route might be building up. So this is about building a portfolio of skill sets that can take you to and enable you to do what you would like to do. So it might mean that you're joining a kitchen that can help you learn how to chop the best, how to clean the best, and how to prepare the spices the best way. It might take a long time, and you might not see the immediate viral celebrity, but it is ultimately going to be help you be ready and enable you to create that impact. But the route that we often forget about is the build around. When we want to be so focused in this goal, we forget every other ancillary and important paths that also exist. In this example, it might be that you actually can learn how to design a restaurant. Let's just assume you don't even like to cook. Then you can say, well, I want to build restaurants and I want to figure out how to create the most beautiful serviceware. I want to learn how to become a general manager of a restaurant. And I think when you're so focused in one way to be, you often forget that there are multiple ways to create impact. And I want you to understand that there's no way. So I want to give you a personal example and make it tangible for you. This is my impact statement. When I went to get my Ph.D. in neuroscience, I said, well, I would love to make neurological therapies and drugs great and accessible and culturally accepted. So my first path was, my current path that I'm on is actually building up. So I have left academia and then kind of been on a unexpected route to some people's eyes. But I believe that the skill sets that I'm accruing through science, team management, policies, business acumen are all going to help me create that impact. I might not do it today, but it's going to help me become and succeed in what I'm setting out to do. In the long run, of course, I have to build around helping creating awareness, networking, and how do I think about the cultural impact, and in bettering that and advocacy work. So those are some of the build around paths that I'm thinking about. Now, do you have to have 3 paths for every impact you want to pursue? I can tell you that when I was graduating, I went to a job fair. And then I said, I want to create medicines and I want to decide what medicines to create. And I'm a scientist. And I went to this job fair and told them I want to do just that. And then this was the face of the career fair hosts that laughed at me and said, well, you've been a scientist all your life. So what makes you think that you have the ability to make those decisions? And they weren't wrong, by the way. That's the only training I had. So for this goal, I realized that immersion immediately is perhaps not the path forward for me and what I'm trying to achieve, but there are other ways for me to get there. So let me give you a corporate example of this. So this increased health span. So health span is defined the number of years that you spend in good health is the corporate mission of where I work today, Cambrian Biopharma. And there are multiple ways to get there, and let's figure out what those are. So immerse, build up, build around. So when we first say health span and living long, healthful life, people assume, well, then you must be exploring fountain of youth. That is what you're going after. But for us, that's also, and some people are pursuing that route, but that is not the path that we decided to take as a company. what we decided to do is to build up. And then we are building a number of pipeline of programs that are going to each independently contribute towards elucidating the mechanisms that are leading towards aging and helping us understand how human bodies age. Now, there's a build around component of this we're also working on, which is increasing awareness and improving the standards of which similar companies like us are working, and then perhaps working with the FDA to define what aging means and what the biomarkers could mean. So again, as a company also, we often assume that immersion is the only way and the direct way to get to your outcome, but there are other ways that are perhaps more impactful and worth considering. So with that bit of a anti-inspirational, anti-immersion note, let me tell you something even more anti-perspirational, and which is to lose focus. So to do that, I want to tell you a little factoid. This most famous lady perhaps in the world, Mona Lisa. When Da Vinci painted Mona Lisa, it took him anywhere from 4 to 16 years, depends on which Wikipedia page you would like to read. And so I would say about average of 10 years to paint this. It wasn't because he was a terrible painter or if he wasn't productive. In fact, people back then were absolutely productive. They didn't even have social media back then. So this is what he was doing full time. But why did it take him 10 years? So he set up this canvas and he went out and he studied other things. He studied anatomy. He dissected human face. And every time he learned a new fact, he changed the stroke of that brush on her face, right? He studied math. He studied science. And that resulted in being able to complete this masterpiece in 10 years. And let's assume he probably could have sat down and been productive and finished it in 10 years. I'm sure there's people in his life said, look, you've had this up for a long time. Just sit down and finish it. You're a good painter. And let's just assume he heeded that advice. Would Mona Lisa be the masterpiece that you see here? I don't think so. I think everything that he cultivated had indirect and direct impact into creating this, quite frankly, creepy, because you do follow her eyes at the Louvre. And then he figured that out by studying other things. So a corporate example. So by the way, this is a little nod to how Da Vinci kept his notes. So you can go back at some point and learn how he did about that. It's a quirky man. Is a corporate example of this is how Cambrian is pursuing 13 drivers of aging. So some might say, well, just pick a road. We hear this often with investors too. They said, there must be a winner that you're betting on. There must be one thing that you think you can really deep dive into that's going to make the difference. But we said, no, we believe that for us to create a masterpiece of science, that we need to pursue many different paths and then learn how they converge, right? So I'm here to remind you that today's society says, don't be distracted, focus, spend 10,000 hours, right? Trying to be the expert and the guru. But really the important aspect that you don't even know is all of you, your passions, your hobbies, your interests, that trivial knowledge that people call it trivial, that might actually be the thing that helps you create a masterpiece. And that masterpiece is your life. So don't feel afraid to lose focus and take time and then really explore all of your interests that come to you. So next uninspirational message I have for you is that you are average. And I'm sure it's not fun hearing that. So let me take a detour and explain what I mean. Let me tell you a little bit about gossip. Why do we gossip? So gossip is actually not to spread information. In fact, it's a very ineffective way of spreading information. If you really wanted to spread information, you would spam email, you would scream it out from the mountaintops. But gossip, the purpose of gossip is to test your own norms. So when you have a sensational knowledge or fact, You're going to go to your friend and say, hey, did you hear X, Y, and Z? And if your friend says, oh, yeah, well, I heard that. That's nothing. I do that too. Suddenly your norms have shifted and said, oh, I thought that was sensational. It looks like it's actually the norm, right? So the purpose of gossip is really driven by human intrinsic to achieve homeostasis. And that's just our nature. We like to be comfortable. As much as we say disruption is good, you have to stand out and all those things, human intrinsic, even our molecular level is pushing us to be average. So how do we apply that in real life? So I am sure you've heard many messages in a more compelling way than I can tell you around why you should seek out inspirational people that are going to lift you up, right? So let me be more specific about that advice. If you want your career to take off, you should probably be surrounding yourself with people whose careers are taking off. If you want to get yourself to read 100 books, you should probably be spending time with people who read more books than you do to help you shift that paradigm of what is average. And I'm sure you have heard those things, and those cliches are true for a reason. And you should seek out and then form relationships with those people that are inspiring to you in every facet that you deem to be important in your life. But what I also want to add on that note is we speak and focus so much on seeking out new people to make us better, to shift our average. But we don't think enough about being the person that shifts someone else's average. So what does that mean? So average is just a mathematical equation. It says you're just an addition of everyone around you in some mathematical form, and you divide it and you get an average. So that means that it doesn't just have to be the new people you seek out that brings your average up. You can also work towards lifting the averages of people around you that exist already. So tactically, that means if your friend wants to get a job, help that friend. Help her practice that interview. If you want people around you to be reading more, well, motivate them to read more with you. And if those altruistic reasons of making other people better isn't good enough, do it for the selfish reasons, because their heightening of that average will uplift yourself. And that's a selfish reason. If your friend gets a job and you help them, maybe it will open a door that you didn't know that you were going to have. So don't only focus on finding others that will make you better. Be the person that lifts everyone else's average as well. So fourth lesson, I'm here to tell you that you need help. Absolutely need help. What help do you need? Well, first, what do every single Fortune 500 CEOs have in common? These CEOs are people we look up to in society and say they're the heights of their career. They worked so hard, they overcame this, and they did that. What do all of them have in common? What they have in common, and is legally required to have this in common, is that they have a board of directors. They have a board of directors mandated by your government to help them. We celebrate these CEOs, don't talk about the board, but guess what? They're surrounded by people who help them. In fact, it is such a nuanced help. I'm here to not have you read all this, but SEC has ironed out exactly what help they need. They need help making decisions, they need help reviewing documents, and they have committees that are defined. They have how to proceed with them, how to have meetings with them, and then how all these things that they need to follow to make sure they get the help they need. These great people that you're told to be like, they get all this structured help. So why wouldn't you need help? So with that, I want to suggest that you form your personal board of advisors. So let me give you my version of this. It's called the Juliette version. Slightly simpler than perhaps the SEC version, but here's my true and very authentic chicken scratch. So for me, when I think about when I'm making major decisions in life, and all of you are here because you're trying to better yourself constantly and putting that weight on your shoulders. But I think about what help and what points of view should I go for. So it should be well-rounded. It shouldn't just be 10 of your closest friends. You should actually be very explicit about the type of perspective that you invite. For me, that's a skeptic. I want that negative Nancy, the Debbie Downer, who's gonna poke holes into every one of my bubbles and tell me it's gonna suck. I want that point of view. But I also want a cheerleader who's gonna say, you know what, no matter what you do, you're gonna be amazing. Our souls need it. I need it. You need it. And then I want someone who knows me really well, who doesn't care, but just cares about my well-being. No matter what, he's gonna say, you know what, that's great, but are you gonna be okay with that? Are you gonna feel good? Are you gonna be healthy? And then I might need a rational, realistic friend who's gonna walk through with me unemotionally every step of the way and help me read through documents, make the decisions with me, and not get emotionally disturbed, and then make sure I stay on my path. And a few other examples depending on what the decision might be. Now, what I want you to be aware is two things. P.S. It's not a vote. It's not a vote. It is your life. And you owe it to yourself to hear these different perspectives. So make sure you are making room and seeking out these type of perspectives. P.S. The fastest way to lose a friend is not being aware of who they are. So if you go to a skeptical friend expecting a cheerleader answer, and then you get very upset that they didn't give you a cheerleader answer, that's like the fastest way to lose a friendship. So another thing to be aware of is ensuring that you are self-aware and that you're aware of the people around you that's going to give you that advice. So with that are the 4 lessons I want to share with you today. And when the magnitude of your own dreams or the inspirations that you're getting from others become so heavy, I just want you to remember these very uninspirational notes in hopes that they continue to encourage you and help you be. Because if you can stay on whatever path you choose and cultivate your own passions and interests, I promise you, you are going to have a fulfilling life and a very impactful career. So with that, I will invite questions. Yes.
Yeah, so kind of related, but how did you know you wanted to do your PhD? And can you talk a little bit about your research and like what you did?
Sure. So the question was, how did I decide to do my PhD and my research? Okay. So, so when I went to college, I actually didn't like science because the perception of science I had from high school was that you memorize a lot and you just answer a lot of questions, and that wasn't engaging enough for me. But when I went to college, especially when I was exposed to neuroscience, I realized that there is no answer. So I found out quickly that I love ambiguity. I love not having an answer, and I love pursuing that lack of answer. And I also the more I learned, the more how much deeper I realized we're lucky to be born in a health. If you are healthy, you're very lucky, and that there are very people around us that we should do a better job of uplifting because they're born with disorders or mental illnesses that are no fault of their own. And in order to help them, we need to make therapies better. We need to make awareness better. So that was really my motivation around that. And my research, therefore, was around congenital disorders. So in undergrad, I did prenatal, so before birth development. And then in my master's, I did perinatals, around birth migration of the cells. And then in my PhD, I did postnatal, which was using a model of autism to test the development of white matter cells and then how they impact your IQ development. Oh, in the back.
You mentioned how the need help, whether it's like help a ton of communities or to ask from a ton of people. But I want to ask, since it's like exhausting to be able to like ask from so many people, how do I know who I'm meant to reach and adhere to? If I have like, let's say 5 of these about, why have to go to everyone? Once my idea like feels very exhausting by the time I'm done with this person, or once I get so many conflicting ideas, like how do I balance having so many ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, when you are seeking help in different perspectives, doesn't it get tiring at some point to ask so many people for all these perspectives? You're absolutely right. So I think the first step is being aware of what voice you need to hear. So for instance, if you are already skeptical about the decision you're making, maybe you don't need another skeptic to tell you why to be skeptical. And it also, so you should make sure that, so the point is you want to create a good balance of perspective. So you should start with where is your starting point and what additional voices do you need. And then second is that it depends on the magnitude of the decision you're making and the time in which you're trying to make them. So you might not need to seek out a lot of people if it's a minor decision. So it is just to make sure that you feel comfortable that you have considered multiple points of view before you make that decision. But sometimes you want to make that decision because in your gut it feels right. And that's okay too. So if perhaps you've pointed out a really good threshold is when it becomes too taxing and because you don't see the benefits of pursuing those different perspectives, then you are probably unnecessarily taxing your system. So you should feel like the help you seek out is the help you need. Yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned how you went into career fairs, you have these like big long goals, and then it kind of takes like a losing focus to kind of figure out where you need to be. So especially in the sciences, I feel like it's hard to lose focus because you are so specialized and so highly trained. So how did you go about losing focus in your career, and how did that help you?
Yeah. So how do you go about losing focus when some of these paths require such focus? That is right. So I think that ultimately when you're in your sciences and you're working on achieving, so it depends on the arc of the chapter that you're creating. So in the long chapter, it's okay to lose focus, but in a specific moment, you may need to focus and achieve that goal. Having said that, even if you're pursuing that degree in the sciences, don't forget to pursue hobbies. That's something that I wish I had done more of, to be frank, when I was pursuing my PhD. I wish that I had cultivated more interests during that time. So even though perhaps I did stay too focused also. Yes.
Hi, thank you. I was just going to ask, so perhaps most times we don't have all these people around to ask, about like this, and we have to make a big decision. So you perhaps have like any intrinsic ways which you can, kind of structure and walk through your decisions when you have not all of those people around. Say you need a cheerleader, and you only have a critic, and all you need is to cheer yourself up about this very good idea you have, and you go to a couple of friends, but you are not getting that, and then maybe some intrinsic ways you can deal with that that wouldn't just beat you up inside.
Yeah, so the question is when you might not have all these different folks around you, are there ways you can do more to figure out more intrinsically what you need to do? So that is a very good question. And in fact, I could probably fill 8 hours on different frameworks I had to work out for myself. And what I can tell you is this, is that absolutely you're on the right track about, are there intrinsic ways I can answer this question? And I can tell you quickly a couple of different frameworks as examples for you to figure that out. For example, I drew a lot of these things in life are actually explained quite beautifully through math. So what I drew in my career path was I would draw a graph and a math and some slope. And I said, okay, so am I trying to optimize for the highest slope velocity, or am I trying to optimize for the plateau, but that's gonna over time give me a steady area under the curve? Because the area under the curve is what's giving me satisfaction. So I do think that there are different frameworks you can construct like that to test yourself around a certain formulaic way to think about it. And another formula, for example, I created was when I set my resolutions or goals, I felt it was too linear to say things like, well, I'm going to be healthy this year, I'm going to read 10 books this year. So instead, what I wrote was like a 3x3 matrix of what are physical, mental, or spiritual and intellectual ways I'm going to either nourish, challenge, or inspire myself. And then that helps me intrinsically figure out what is going to make me happy. So you're almost making yourself a third person in your decision making and constructing some mathematical or some sort of chart, and then forcing yourself to figure out those answers. Any other? Yes.
So I'm curious about the building up and the building around you mentioned, because I'm wondering how you respond to people who might just say it's too late to expand your specialization like that. It's too late to really grasp the business acumen that you're talking about, or the expertise in policy, when you have such a strong background in sciences. So in terms of approaching the building up and the building around, how do you respond to the people who think that we're trying to silo you into specialization in sciences?
Yeah, so how do you respond to people who are already telling you something is too late and silo you? Okay, so first of all, let me give you a statistic that is somewhat indirectly related, is we hear a lot about startup founders that are very successful in their 20s. I even gave you a couple of examples. The average age of successful startup founders is actually 45. That's probably shocking because we don't celebrate that or talk about that. It's almost norm to do something impactful later in that age. Now, why is that factually true? It's because they needed the buildup and the well-roundedness of their careers to get there. So when people are trying to silo you, I think you can think about two things. One is related to what I just mentioned around the arc of your career, right? So you can think of, you can specialize few things, and then each specialization might be not just few days or few weeks or few months, but it might be few years. You might say, I'm gonna specialize in this few years and a few years and few years, right? So you can broaden the scope through decades of work. And then when also people tell you it's too late, you should ask yourself, too late for who? It is their perception of their life and projection that it is too late. And it is because we have such inspirational figures for making it big in their early 20s that we think if we don't hit it by then, it is too late. But the fact is, we're living to be 80 something. So if it is too late and it takes you 2 years longer to get there, you're either going to be 55 or 57 when you get there. And then guess what? It's not that different. So it's not too late at all. And people pivot all the time.
Thank you so much. I was curious what kind of lessons you ported or learned from academia into your private sector.
Okay, I love this question. So the question is, what are the lessons I ported over from academia to private sector. So I used to have this myopic view as well, where I said, well, I learned hard skill of science. What can the companies I've been at use with scientific knowledge? Because I thought of myself with just a collection of facts. But it turns out the word you used is skills, and that's absolutely correct. What I didn't think about, because it wasn't taught explicitly, was my ability to problem solve, my ability to bring structure to ambiguity, my ability to analyze data, my ability to create a hypothesis and a data framework to pursue that data. And ultimately, those are fundamental skills of a scientist, but those are unspoken skills that are so important in the private sector. If you can go to any company, take on any job. If you have the ability to bring ambiguity, think of hypotheses that other people have not thought of, and then structure data and analyze it and interpret that, you're gonna be successful anywhere you go.
I really love that whole concept of having your personal board of directors. Over the course of your life, do you think that has stayed as like mostly the same people, or as you've grown, do you think you've sought out like new people to kind of take on those roles?
Another really, really important question for everyone who's especially pursuing a path of growth is, do you change your people that you go to advise for? Now, I want to share with you something related to the whole, you are the average of everyone around you. The fact is, especially if you come from a disadvantaged background, the moment you start to change and you start to perturb the homeostasis of those people who knew you back then, they don't like it. So they might give you advice out of jealousy, out of envy, and not always out of your best interest. Not to say it's all bad, but that's just human nature. So as you grow, a positive way to look at it is, as you grow, you might want to seek out advice of someone who's done it, who's gone through it, and who's been there. And that changes over time. So I think it depends on which advice you're looking for. If it's someone, let's say a cheerleader or a nurturer, of course, hopefully that doesn't change too much. For me, that's probably family, right? Who doesn't care what the answer is. They just care that my well-being is good. But for other aspects, I think it's absolutely expected and normal to invite new voices into your circle. Yes.
How do you go about building directors and stuff? I feel like it's really hard to network with people once you've entered the private space.
Yeah, how do you go about building your board of directors? And it's really hard to network. So that is a very difficult aspect, especially if you happen to be an introvert, like myself included. And then the word network is probably like some of the scariest word ever. And I think this is where you have to really understand your own natural inclinations and proclivities about relationship forming. I have built friends over time, and then perhaps quote unquote network over time, but I don't have as many or big as some people, but they're very deep and then strong how they are. So it might take you long. So your friends might come out of every event with like 10 more phone numbers and who they're going to catch up with, and you might come out with one, but just know that that one might be the one that stays with you. And so don't feel like you need everyone today. Because ultimately in the next 10, 20 years, if you can say you have 15, 10 people that are close you go to advice for, that's plenty. And that's what, one a year? That's already a win. So don't pressure yourself into going to all these events if you don't feel that connection. Okay. I think, yes.
Building yourself and immersing yourself and also building up. I guess like in this day and age, like kind of like
Not so. How do you? So society is pressuring you to be faster, and how do you not become overwhelmed? And you're absolutely right. I think, and I mean, to use the example like Da Vinci, right? So how fast did his surroundings change compared to how fast is your surroundings change? Probably at an exponential, literally exponential way, given the way data shapes our world today. So there's constant needing of change. And I would say this, there are changes that you should make quickly with that growth. And then there are changes that is still true to how the pace of that Da Vinci incurred. And then let me differentiate the two. The change that you should be making that quickly because the world is at your fingertips is your perspectives and your open-mindedness. So that you should absolutely be able to change at the pace at which the world requires of you. And that is, but you know, as fast as the world is coming at you, you have all the information on your fingertips. So I wouldn't worry too much. The thing that is overwhelming might feel overwhelming is if you feel like the changes of factual changes are asking you to change at core, and that should never change. So things that you want to pursue, and then the career and the pace at which they expect you to pursue it, you don't have to worry too much and overwhelm yourself with that pace. Now, the welcoming thing is, many years ago, probably your parents' era, people didn't switch jobs that often, right? Like they maybe 30 years get a pension, maybe 10 years if they're daring. Now you guys might be bombarded with messages of change every 2 years or you're stagnant. Change every year. That's the only way to move up in your career. I do think that there are shortcomings of that, right? Because when you change that quickly, and then that comes out of FOMO, right? What's the other company doing that I'm not learning? Especially in these most pivotal years of your early career stage, it's like working in the kitchen. You should learn from the best, and it takes time to learn how to best chop, best boil water. And these foundational years, you should make sure that you have your stable core and you stay true to it. And then people who want you to change that quickly, just it works for them. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you. But it is overwhelming. You're right. But that's why I want you to remember there's no one way, right? Lose yourself, and you need all the help, and you're average, right? You are. We all are. So don't lose that. And then don't think that you have to overwhelm yourself with paths that other people have chosen for themselves at all. Last question.
So this is more like a thought rather than a question. But you say you have to make a decision and you go to your board, people that you have to talk to. Kind of ideally, the bulk part of that decision should come from you yourself. So you have to make a decision from having gathered all of that. But more realistically, we have to kind of agree that the environment and people we surround ourselves with shape most part of our decision. And should you make a series of bad decisions that may or may not lead to some form of frustration, and then you find out that maybe the people you're surrounding yourself with are the biggest part of that, and they're kind of, making the bad decisions or yourself, but you're not really sure. And you don't know what to do. Well, I guess that is my thought. So it's not more like a question, it's just a thought. So what do you do in that series? When you don't want to be frustrated, but you keep making bad decisions, but people maybe you surround yourself with, or the final thought you have. So I don't know. It's just fun.
Yeah, no, it's true. And then when you feel like you made a lot of wrong decisions, what do? Look, it's only bad decisions if you didn't learn from it. And then these days, especially, you can quickly, if true, it's very rare. But if you really feel that people you're surrounded by are not good for you, there's an easy way to calibrate that. You can listen to podcasts, see shows, go to therapy. There's a very easy way to test some of your assumptions about the people you're surrounded with. But I know the decisions feel like bad decisions, but unless they're really unethical, dishonest, and really damaging to others, with short of those things, I would say don't think of them as bad decisions. It's fine. You learn, and that's what's important.